nurtured, how it is sustained, before we can know how it is eliminated. Okay? So, this is the portion of the time when, by your asking me questions, I can discuss things that I couldn't discuss in the first half. So, I ask you to participate with me. Does anyone in the audience have a question?
1 second. If you have a question, get on the mic. That way everyone can hear the question. Okay, right there. Is that on?
Okay, turn it, yeah.
Yes, sir. I just had a question about the clitoris being cut off and
Right.
being detected. It sounds painful. It doesn't seem like something I would agree with.
Right.
So I'd like to know why that's okay.
Okay. I'm not saying it's okay, and I don't want all of you women going out there and exposing your clitorises to the knife. That is not my intent. My intent is to bring you understanding of why it is your ancestors, not just you in Africa, but over in China, in parts of Asia, quote, Asia Minor, the Native American women, evidence of it in Kemet on the walls showing the removal of the clitoris. This is not something that is just incidental to the recognition of the feminists. The feminists want the clitoris because the clitoris is a vestigial or supernumerary organ. It has no function other than to stimulate a very aggressive electrical response of the brain. Now, everything in the body, metaphysically, has a dual purpose. Everything, every organ, every cell, everything you have in your body functions on a dual purpose, except the clitoris. Nothing functions on a singular purpose in the universe. Everything has a yin and yang principle. There is no function that has something looking like the male organ without functioning like the male organ. If you have what looks exactly like the penis and you can't urinate from it or you cannot shoot sperm from it, then it is a supernumerary organ or it is a vestigial organ, for whatever word that means, and it has no other function. It is an overshooting of the principle of gestation. In other words, when that body, we degenerated from where we were. And the reason why that particular act of circumcision, that act of clitorindectomy went on, was because the great, 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 great ancestors understood that the archetypal body had been defiled. The environment was under enormous attack, radiative attack. And in another book I wrote, and I showed it to you in the last program, called The Ebers Unveiled, I told of how herbology came about. It came about as a way of addressing a very how do you say it, hostile environment that actually came about based upon the wars of the people they called the Neteru. There were great, great battles, cosmic battles, intergalactic battles going on, and at the time there was a huge atomic war that took place that destroyed all of the green vegetation of Kemet. Why you think there's a huge desert there? There's no huge desert was just there, this came out of nowhere. Nature doesn't create a desert. Its aspect is towards creating all the greenery when given a chance. Desert is an artificial phenomenon based upon, if it isn't artificial, it is made based upon a phenomenon or some form of cosmic event that changed the conditions of life so that life could not be, and that is against life. On earth, all life is seeking to show and express itself. If there is a component of the planet that cannot create life, then that in itself shows that something very drastic happened to that area. Well, there was a huge atomic war at the time where it destroyed everything in Kemet as well as the people. And the Ebers Papyrus was work documented by the Neteru or Ast, these people that were called Ast, Heru, Heteru. These weren't people, they were offices, just like you had president, vice president, and so forth. Heru, Neteru, Isis, or Ast, these were titles. They weren't names. So these titles, this one called, just say, I am a priest of, if you read the opening of the Ebers Papyrus, it says, I am a priest of Isis. of the order of Isis. And under that particular part, it speaks about the fact that they're warriors, these priests of Isis. And they said that Isis is the one, or whoever it was that was Isis at that time, gave them the information that they now put into what is known, and what was translated to be called the Ebers Papyrus. In it, the Ebers Papyrus, essentially, if you read it, you would see that it is a book written about radiation poisoning. That's it. It has nothing to do with, how are you going to tell me that a people that were so orthobiotically correct, when they ate their food, they ate the dates, they ate everything, they bathed 2 and 3 times a day, they were one of the most civilized and healthiest people on the planet, all of a sudden symptoms of pustules coming out on the body, women aborting spontaneously, 6 to 10 day menstrual cycles, eyes going blind from cataracts. What are these things? Well, the very same things that they had treatments for in the Ebers Papyrus, you can see after the blast at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So something happened to our people during which time it wiped out our indigenous ancestry. And what happened during that time, we began to degenerate so greatly. And this happened over thousands upon thousands of years, because Kemet that you see with Menes coming together and all that, this is like a survival colony compared to what was really here. And that Sphinx was not a man's face, it was a female face. It was the symbol of Virgo on top of Leo, the lion. And it was facing into the sign of Leo. And the thing is, the face was blown off simply to take the African features and the fact that it was a female. Because remember, the Catholic Church at that time was on the way to destroying the feminine principle of God. Okay, so you had to understand that. Now, with the degeneration of the female and the male, specific anatomical anomalies began happening hundreds of thousands of years ago. Now, if you look in certain different texts, and I remember Dr. Brown telling me that this Gray's Anatomy was not the real one. It's not as accurate as some of the other type of anatomy books that are out there. But when I was reading the anatomy book, I read what Mr. Gray and all the rest of the people who contributed were saying about certain things having to do with gestation, with impregnation, with conception, with the way that particular entity grew from blastocyst all the way up to fetus. And one thing kept happening all throughout the description. They kept using the word supernumerary, and they kept using the word vestigial. So I had to go to the dictionary to find out what they meant. And it meant something that has to do with no more use. Something that overshot its mark and became useless. Something in that vein. So I'm saying, okay, they said the clitoris was this. And what they began to see, that when I was looking at the description of the fetus or the blastocyst and the zygote, they began saying that this particular principle, some part of the developmental stages, there was something called the Wolffian duct and the Gaffian follicle. Now, the Wolffian duct and the Gaffian follicle, I believe, and don't quote me because in my book, The Epicene Enigma, I'm a lot more concise in that. And I'm not here to talk about hermaphroditism right now, but I'm going to touch upon this thing because of the clitoris. In the book, it stated that the Wolffian duct, as it begins to create the genitals as well as, I believe, the kidneys and all the rest of these little components, it seems to overshoot, and I believe it's the Wolffian duct that creates the penis, or it may create the vagina, it creates the penis. And now they say that after the Wolffian duct has created what is going to be the penis, it overshoots and seems to keep going, as if it passes that particular ring pass knot from one gender into another, which means that something was wrong within the matrix, the genetic DNA matrix, that forced that Wolffian duct to make the penis and then keep going until when the child is born, it creates a prepuce. The prepuce on the male that is circumcised is evidence of the female vaginal opening. It is an overshooting of the sexual or the gamete from one specific polarity into the next. Metaphysically, it's a polarity where yin and yang are balancing in a dynamic, and then all of a sudden something happens to destabilize that particular matrix, and now this particular energy keeps falling towards the center, closer and closer, and farther away from its integrity zone. So now you have the prepuce being created through the Wolffian duct, and the Gaffian follicle now shooting over the prescribed design and creating a male component, which ends up being Bullerian. Okay, the Bullerian. Mullerian. Okay, see, I'm correct. I stand corrected. See, that's why Doc is so... It overshoots, and now you have this vestigial organ called the clitoris. Now, here you have our ancestry who are suffering through these enormous cycles of madness, and these little places called Edens were set up by the Neteru to house the survivors of this Holocaust. And in the books, especially in the Vedas, there's a man standing before the door of one of these Edens, and it says, "Look upon me, I am no longer white and pale with leprosy, let me in." Oh yes, it's in the book. And this is written by the Vedas at least 10,000 years ago. So it's written about a circumstance, a great cataclysm that happened to this planet thousands upon thousands of years ago that changed your biological integrity so that now what is normal was not natural to then. So now the clitoris, and all women will agree, when that clitoris is stimulated, there is a whole other type of stimulation than vaginal stimulation. It is this intense stimulation. It's like some women who are extremely gynic and feminine can't stand that and will not allow you to play with that clitoris because it is too agitating. It makes them actually sick. And I know reports of that. Because, and when I see who it is that are very gynic and don't like that, they're the ones who are extremely gynic in nature. Now, it's not always that, because you have a very happy medium where it's used as an adjunct. But there are these women who have been lifting, and it says here in the material that Brother Aline gave me, that their clitorises, here it is, I spoke to a friend who went to bed with a top female bodybuilder. He said her clitoris was about the size of his thumb. Now, I say to you that the clitoris was known to our ancestors at the time. The clitoris was known to our ancestors at the time as something that was not supposed to be. And the culture began to say, as you were growing up, first of all, you could not be a man until you removed the prepuce. Now, why did they say that? Now, it's just, you just happen to say, well, they were barbarians. Oh, well, they didn't know any better. They were little savages who just wore a loincloth and danced with bones in their noses. Why is it that the Hebrews were actually taking this particular, why is it all over in India, in the Vedic, in the China, in the Japanese chronicles of gods and sovereigns? Why is it all over the place? Even before the Caucasoid came into all these lands. Why was this practiced by peoples who didn't even know each other existed? Because they knew that these particular things were not natural to their physiology. They knew it. And what they did was, the removal of the clitoris was not the butchery that you see today. The removal of the clitoris was done the same way you removed... No?
The pygmies don't do it.
The umbilical cord.
Why the pygmies don't do it, man?
Okay, well, let's get to the what do you call it? Okay.
The oldest people on the planet.
They're not the oldest people on this planet.
Oh, yes, they is.
Oh, that's what you think. The umbilical cord itself, as far as the tying off of it and the drinking of certain herbs, women, and you know this particular ritual exists, women in the older cultures drank specific herbs at the time they reached 7 years of age and 8 years of age. They were given specific herbs to maintain the feminine principle. In a group of native Indians who have not seen civilization for 300 years, men are given a gourd with a particular powder that is grown by the women, that when they take it, it maintains the integrity of the masculine principle after they've been circumcised. When they eat this or take this, the only way they can marry is if they continue to take this particular herb to maintain their masculine integrity. Now, the reason why the Pygmies may not have been using that is because the knowledge of it was probably erased from their culture completely. Yes. Chwa. Thank you. All right, thank you very much. All right, now Ubuntu, and I apologize to Ubuntu brothers and sisters and the Twa people. Circumcision and clitorindectomies were practiced the world over because your ancestors knew that these particular organs interfered with the harmony of the particular yang or yin energy that was manifested in that body. God as flesh manifested as two polarities. God as unity could not exist in the flesh and be balanced. That is why you have this particular feminine energy in a masculine is completely aberrant to the form itself. And a masculine energy in a feminine form is aberrant to the form. So they tried to remove it for that balance. And they did it. And this was not something that they did because they wanted to. This is something they did because they felt they had to in order to maintain the integrity of their gender. Otherwise, they found that the women with the clitorises and the men with the prepuces had specific behavioral situations, not to mention the fact that it was not healthy where they were living at the time because of the radiation in the air. Everything had to be done in order. And what do you think the scarification was about? What do you think the piercing of the ears was about? Everything that was natural to you, the way your brain dealt with communication to other planets, communication to other tribes, by mind force alone, all of that was lost. The ability to breathe proper combinations of oxygen, nitrogen, and helium so that you could have a whole body is lost. Why? So what you do in order to maximize your intake of oxygen, they used to scarify themselves to increase the amount of blood vessels being made or blood cells being made. So they would scar themselves every now and then because of the climate that they lived in order to maximize the intake or the creation of oxygen-bearing cells. The creation or the piercing of the ears was to maximize the ability to be psychically in tune. Gold was put in so that they could amplify their psyche at night, and the silver was put in order to attenuate it in the daytime because it was an overload. Because if you turn the ear upside down, you will see that it's a fetus and that the lobe is the head. And all the way around here, you will notice that as you go down, you're going down the spine. That's why sisters pierce their ears, to enhance their ability psychically and to sometimes, and especially when they put the silver in, to maintain their feminine biostasis. The men wore all the gold. The women wore the silver. This crossing that they show you with the, and this is in my book as well, when they show you the crossing of the crook and the flail. Well, the reason for the crossing of the crook and the flail was because when Pharaoh or one of the high priests would sit down in council during a time when they knew there were magnetic tides, magnetic fluxes in the atmosphere that were dangerous to them, this gold, this thing was made of pure pounded and refined gold threads, the flail. So that when the radiation energy went up, like a Geiger counter, the gold threads would start going up. And they say, okay, time to get out of here. Let's go in and disperse. The very fact that the Kemites began wearing skirts was evidence of the fact that problems were happening in Kemet at that time, because skirts were not worn by men until of late. All right? You wore pants because pants essentially affords a man a better dispersal of heat. Men make heat better than women do. Your lungs are smaller than us. So you don't make heat as fast and as quickly. So whenever brothers, you see sisters say, well, I'm a little cold, get that coat for them because it's real. Their body temperature, they can't make heat very well. Testosterone makes a lot of heat. So when you see women start peeling off clothes or wearing a lot of tight skin type pants, above and beyond fashion, that's the testosterone flowing through their system, creating an unnatural thermic rise in their bloodstream and in their blood temperature. So they have to dissipate the heat, just like men do when they wear pants. You want to know how to stay? Well, what about the wintertime, brother Valentine? Yeah, the wintertime is that you now layer yourself with different skirts, 3 and 4 of them, 5 of them. And you will be surprised how each layer traps warmth. I want to read something to the sister right before I go to the next question. And I believe that this particular letter that was written by a woman about women, and in answer to a particular, I had to put it in here. It was incredible. Listen very carefully. And this woman's words are as follows. After reading the letter entitled, "Don't Treat Moon Time as Bad Medicine." Now, Sister Puma Lagitanya gave me this letter because she, as a indigenous person to Turtle Island, has contacts, and that's Sister Puma back there, has contacts with a lot of our indigenous brothers and sisters. And she came up with this letter from an indigenous magazine. And it was very profound, and I'm going to read it to you. After reading the letter entitled, "Don't Treat Moon Time as Bad Medicine." Now, this particular letter was sent in by a Caucasian woman. And the moon time is something that they call the menstrual cycle. I felt compelled to respond. The woman who wrote the letter said she is concerned that people would accept the traditional beliefs about moon time. It saddens me to know that people are so misinformed or only partially informed on traditional ways. My concern is for the people and future generations. Your reader is right that moon time is a controversial issue. What her letter doesn't state is that it is only controversial amongst white women. I have never heard of a case where a Native American woman argued against the belief that moon time women should stay away from sacred places and objects, and what the reason for that was. Women were given a very special purpose in life, but people have lost sight of it. Just 2 generations ago, a woman's accomplishments were measured by how well she took care of her children and her husband. She would stand behind her husband and give him reason to achieve status in society. She would take care of him in many ways. She would raise her children with love, spirituality, morals, values, and respect. She would always be there to keep the family strong and together. She would never put herself before her family. Her hard work and sacrifice were noble and humble, not self-serving. Each woman knew that she held the destiny of the people in her hands. And that's what made women great. About 40 years ago, the elders saw what was happening to women. They decided that women should sweat and sundance because they were becoming like men. Women were losing sight of their spiritual nature and the meaning of life. The elders held fast to the moontime beliefs. Moontime, after all, represents the essence of purification in life. It contains so much power that women have difficulty controlling it. The ancestors knew the sacred purposes of women and the traditional ways of life, and they lived full and happy lives. Once people started changing traditional beliefs, we ended up with the world we know today. The moon lodge that the reader described may seem harmless and worthless, but I believe that to change moontime beliefs could lead to the destruction of future generations. After having seen the results of abandoning the old ways, I dare not question the elders' knowledge of the moontime. To alter things in a spiritual way to benefit oneself causes loss of the essence of the power of spirituality itself. These ways were not given to white people. Some white people will be honored by being given the opportunity to follow the traditional ways. The problem is, white people have a tendency to change things to benefit themselves. This only breeds resentment, and in the end, other whites will not be afforded the same opportunity. I would like to thank the woman who wrote the letter for giving me the motivation to choose this forum in which to share my views. If more women believe as I do and spoke out, maybe we could change the world as we know it today. Would it be possible to return to a better way of life, to the life of our ancestors? It is probably not surprising to learn that I am the wife of Chief John Crazy Horse, Lakota medicine man and traditional leader. However, it might surprise you to know that I too am a white woman. My husband and I have committed our lives, now check this, to the traditional way of life and the people. My husband has taught me to find my purpose, and I have found myself. I never knew the strength, power, or love that I possessed until I faced the challenge to be the best that I am, a woman. Now you don't even know what that is. You think a woman is a functional piece of meat that does things. You don't understand the spiritual energy you possess and why it is that you've lost so much of your power through the menstrual cycle. It's like they say, if the women did not bleed as she did, I think there's something about she would probably destroy everything because of the amount of power she has 2 times every month. Because she doesn't channel it properly, she bleeds. This is this metaphysical component. Now, if this woman understands basically what she has seen everywhere around the world, every culture knew that this was a pathology. Why is it that only this termagant female, this Caucasoid female, now wants to tell you that it is somehow some form of initiation into womanhood? Why is it that the clitoris now, something that your ancestors are doing and still doing, and taking off the clitoris the way they knew? They don't know it now because remember Christianity came in and just fucked up all the traditional knowledge. So now they lost the knowledge of how to remove the clitoris naturally, and I have known sisters who come from Ethiopia and different places who told me in open forum that they had no clitoris. And they function absolutely wonderful in sexuality. And they didn't know what the big thing was to have a clitoris. So essentially, don't blame the sisters over in Africa. Don't go for that feminist BS. That somehow the mutilation, of course, they have to find a better way of dealing with the situation. But women don't circumcise men in Africa, and the men don't circumcise the women. These are done by women, for a right, and that's theirs and theirs alone. This American, I'm going to police the world bullshit because I'm going to bring my morality over there and tell you what you need to do, and get you convinced that somehow the removal of the clitoris, because you have become so accustomed to it, is somehow now so wrong. Let's go over there and help to change these barbarians. You got to get out of that mentality. It is not good for you as sisters to say, well, I'm Afrocentric and I'm an African woman, and all of a sudden feel that you want to be selective and pick what you think is African. That's really sick, and that really shows me that you just want a little convenient way to play house. If you want to deal with Africa, then deal with the African women and what they dealt with. Don't be just pussyfooting around and playing games. If you want to deal with Africa, then fine. And I'm saying that to the brothers as well. Don't just be playing at being African. Don't just be playing at being a Melanite. Do what they do, and don't be questioning these African women. You haven't even lived in their village or even been initiated into their society to understand what that move was. And you're going to judge it by your education? I hope that answered your question, sister. Yes. Bonding? Oh, bonding and the umbilical cord. Yeah, birthing and cutting the umbilical cord too soon. The transit from one consciousness time zone within that incubation space and out into it and then cutting it off completely is like being slapped awake. And what happens is there is a portion of the soul that does not, that comes in at the very last moment, after that last beat of that particular cord, before it's tied off. That blood, that consciousness that is in that placenta is a life force that was created based upon the aggregate of cells consciously coming together to form a sieve or a synthesizing or a synergistic contact between the metaphysical or the etheric plane and the physical plane. When that particular part is there, you notice it doesn't come out with the baby, it stays in there. That means that's the connection to heaven and earth still in there. And Dr. Ben said, heaven is a woman's